Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 19th, 2024. Time for another government shutdown. As it turns out, during yesterday's show, we came away with the impression, because it was being reported in the news that this was the case, that there was a deal struck between the parties and the chambers on Capitol Hill for a settlement of sorts. But a continuing resolution that would fund the government through March 14th, that they would avoid a government shutdown. People were unhappy with certain elements of it, or they wanted something included at the last minute or excluded at the last minute. But it largely looked like it was going to work. And guess what? Then all of a sudden it turns out that it didn't, because some Republicans decided they wanted to shut down the government after all, and maybe also set up a default on the debt ceiling, and as it turns out, it was because a Twitter influencer told them that they should do this. Now, okay, that Twitter influencer owns Twitter, and so when I say he's a Twitter influencer, I mean he influences Twitter, but he also uses Twitter to influence others, and he's also apparently the richest man in the world, and he bought the presidency, and Donald Trump is, I guess, kind of nowhere to be found on all this. I guess it sounds like Elon Musk said he wanted the shutdown to go forward first, and then Trump jumped on board. But not only does he want a shutdown, I mean, Elon Musk has never had to deal with what a government shutdown actually means to people. One, because he's a billionaire, two, because he doesn't know anything about how any of this stuff works. But his idea here is that we ought to shut down the government until Donald Trump is inaugurated. Like, who cares what the government does until they switch presidents? So he's actually out there advocating what would, at this point, be a 30-day, 1-month shutdown, and you just sit there and wait for Donald Trump. Now, that might cause certain complications, some of which, under other circumstances, might be avoided, but and under these circumstances, maybe you don't want to actually try and avoid. If he wants chaos, I guess he can have it. But of course, people get hurt in the wake of this sort of nonsense. So he's blown up the deal. And Speaker Johnson, of course, barely hanging on by a thread, hasn't really got any leverage to save it. And doesn't appear interested either. As soon as the deal got broken up on Twitter, he kind of joined the bandwagon and said, yeah, this whole thing I actually arranged kind of sucks anyway. And, of course, the leverage here, Elon Musk, not part of the government, but, of course, he's the financial backing for Donald Trump. Donald Trump, at this point, not part of the government, but also out the window, along with every other norm, is the old we have one president at a time thing. I mean, this has been a temptation during transitions since forever for presidents-elect to start acting as president or to start laying the groundwork for things they want to do in their presidency. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it does not. But every time it gets pressed a little bit too far, the old trope that gets trotted out, because it's real, is that there's only one president at a time, and you got to wait until you're the president before you can really implement these things. Well, okay, but too bad. One of the other new tropes that gets trotted out all the time, of course, is Twitter is not real life. And if you think it is, you got to get outside and touch grass, you stupid nerd. But all of a sudden, Twitter is, in fact, real life. Elon Musk can use Twitter, despite having no governmental role whatsoever, and say, you got to reject this CR that's been, I guess you would say carefully negotiated, even though it's a nice compliment to the people who did the work. It was carefully negotiated. It was negotiated, I'm sure. I don't know how careful it was. But I guess the threat that he can use to exercise leverage over everybody is, well, one, he can get Trump on board to do it. He, kind of a bit of a puppet master role, and people are catching on, and you're beginning to see that leak through in mainstream news coverage when people are being interviewed, Democrats, to their credit, being interviewed and referring to him as President Musk, knowing that it'll bother Trump. But the leverage here is really all Musk's. It basically has been said, any Republican that we catch voting for this thing that I don't want to pass, will be primaried in 2 years, except for the ones who aren't running in 2 years. He was talking about the Senate and the House. He forgot that the senators don't all run in every 2 years, but he wasn't born here, so we'll give him a pass on that, I guess. But he's just basically saying, just as I myself personally funded the race for Donald Trump and carried him across the finish line such that he's now going to be president of the United States, apparently, I can do the same for you. I will just run somebody against you. I will primary you out, and if I don't beat you in the primary, I will defeat you in the general election. I don't know whether that really means backing Democrats or whether he'll put some sort of AI independent fake candidate. I don't know what he'll do. But he can, in fact, there is enough money in that pot for him to put really $10 million behind any primary challenger in the country and every primary challenger around the country. That's the scary part. I don't think I don't know that the founding fathers really imagined there would be one single person who could fund every single race for Congress to the tune of 10 times more than usually gets spent and do it all themselves with no one else's help. But we kind of are in that situation now. All right. Well, Greg Dworkin has joined us, and he himself is a multi-billionaire and plans to counter this whole thing out of his own pocket. Very generous of you, Greg. Good morning. Thank you.
Well, I can't because Bernie would be mad at me.
Oh. Well, all right then.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, if Twitter is real life, luckily, we can just add a community note to whenever Trump and Musk want to do this.
Like a signing statement.
Fix everything.
Remember those? You just attach signing statements to legislation. I signed it because I had to, but I don't believe it, and I'm not going to do it.
So some process stuff here, which makes the politics interesting, and that is that so the GOP was working on this continuing resolution bill. And not being totally steeped in this stuff, of course, I'm always going to mix up, appropriations and spending bills and what's really which and all of that. But the fact is that this CR, this continuing resolution, is needed because otherwise the government shuts down tomorrow night at midnight.
Okay.
So there were some bipartisan negotiations, like in the old days, and the spending bill had some disaster relief added to it, maybe a little farm aid, and then the GOP started complaining. Chip Roy and the other conservatives said, no, it's not cutting the government, which is what we want, which you can never have. We went over that yesterday. Fine. Okay. Matt Glassman points out they've been complaining about this for 13 years and they never get what they want. So they said, well, maybe we won't even vote for it. But that meant that in order to pass the bill, Mike Johnson, the speaker, was going to have to rely on Democratic votes to pass it. But if that happens, there's a special procedure that requires the support of 2/3 of those voting.
Yes, a suspension of the rules.
But that's the problem. If there's a suspension of the rules, you can't do it with Democratic votes alone. You have to have at least some Republican votes voting for it.
Well, why don't they should suspend that rule too.
And that being the case, well, I don't know. I guess you can.
Not like that.
All right. Well,
but you know what? Now you can. Sure.
Trump weighs in and says, no, I don't want this bill.
Yeah.
Then you may not even have the number of requisite Republican votes to pass it on a 2/3 vote.
Right.
Therefore, the bill may not pass. That's Mike Johnson's problem.
This may not pass. I should get it.
You shall not pass. As I fall into the abyss. But by Wednesday afternoon, says the New York Times, the backlash to the legislation had spread so far and wide in GOP ranks, it was unclear whether he would even be able to muster a bare minimum of Republicans to partner with Democrats and push it across the finish line. The bill appeared doomed when Mr. Trump weighed in late Wednesday and said lawmakers need to pass a temporary funding bill without Democrat giveaways and also combine it with an increase in the debt ceiling so that I don't have to deal with this when I'm president.
Yeah, do that. I mean, we're not yet due for a hike in the debt ceiling under an emergency basis at this moment. Yeah, he's decided it will become necessary while he's president, early in his presidency. And I guess someone alerted him to that, and he said, well, I don't want to increase the debt ceiling. I've always screamed about not doing it. And nobody has yet come to him and said, you're a huge hypocrite, sir. Just go ahead.
Right. So David Plouffe writes, okay, so unless it's to get rid of the debt ceiling permanently, there's no Democratic votes that should go with this. A lot of talk about mandates, landslides, and trifectas. Well, you're the government. You do it.
Yeah.
On your own, by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what he's saying is we shut down, you own it.
Yeah. And that has been the dynamic.
Military families who don't get checks at Christmas.
Who
that
cares?
Means everything.
What's the difference? I own Twitter.
Politics is the difference.
Yeah, well, I'm going to pretend I'm going to do today's show as Elon Musk. Who cares? Yeah. I own the government.
Right. And you know who else
I'll
doesn't
get another
care?
army.
Media. So the big media things don't even play this up. Because New York Times doesn't care. They're not getting military checks at Christmas.
Yeah, and what about our emails?
LA Times doesn't care. So there's just so much going on here that's so weird. And I don't know how it plays out because I don't know anymore what's the best interest of the players in their view. I mean, I can tell you from my view what's the best interest. The best interest for Republicans is not to shut the government down because you own it and you're going to lose elections over it.
Yeah,
but from their point of view, I have no idea what they're thinking.
That's true, and they're kind of crazy. And, for many years now, I would say decades now, there's been a significant faction of Republicans who profess in public, I don't know if they really believe it, but they profess in public to believe, to hell with it. If the government shut down, no one would even notice, and that proves my point. I don't know why I'm here collecting my check now that I think about it, but I am, and I still will, even when the government shuts down, so I guess it's cool. Let's do that. You'll all see in the end, no one cares about government, and then you'll want us to slash all of your Social Security, I think. That's what they say. That's what they say they believe.
And yet, for Trump to demand that there's a debt ceiling increase that he doesn't want and that the same Chip Roy type Republicans also don't want means it's impossible to get a bill.
Yeah. Maybe.
So then what?
Well, then the fun really begins.
Because you have to raise the debt ceiling. The only question is, do you do it now where Trump can claim, well, I wasn't even president, or do you do it next year, which is only in a couple of weeks?
Next year.
In which case you are the president.
Yeah, do it next year. That's what now everybody is encouraging Democrats to do. And it sounds like it's taking root. I think I saw a commentary from Hakeem Jeffries last evening, where yesterday began with, well, we don't love doing this whole cooperation thing with the Republicans, but it's actually a fairly Democratic-leaning bill because it kind of has to be. So whatever, we'll keep the government running, and then, we'll all see what the hell happens in the next administration. And then the sneak attack, and then Hakeem Jeffries basically said, well, now to get us back to the table would mean on the debt ceiling anyway, would mean abolishing the debt ceiling. That's the only thing we would show up for. Otherwise, screw you.
Otherwise, they own it. He basically said,
we had a deal, you broke it,
will
the
now
end.
Own any harm visited upon American people that results from a government shutdown. So it's on them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if Hakeem Jeffries says, well, hopefully everybody will print that because he's a respected leader. So
in other words,
maybe
Democrats
we'll
aren't
somewhere.
negotiating anymore.
Yeah,
this
good.
is the bill.
They're
you
tired.
either vote on it or
home.
you don't. And if you don't, then it's on you.
Okay.
And if you do, we'll go along with it.
All right. This bill.
This
sure.
One,
okay.
This time.
Yeah.
Which would be a defeat for Trump. So I could see why they would be all in on doing it.
Sure. I guess
because
so.
It may not have been seen as a defeat for Trump, but after he said all of this, it would be.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess Trump's best strategy here is the thing passes and he says, yeah, well, I didn't really care that much, actually. I said something,
opposite.
But or now it's come to my attention that it's awesome.
Because he said increasing the debt ceiling isn't great, but we'd rather do it on Biden's watch. So you increase the debt ceiling to it. I don't even know if that's in there. And then you pass it, and then Trump says, I got what I want, I won. Yeah. And, of course, he didn't.
All right. He also could lie about what's in it and say, they made a change, and that's why I'm okay with it now.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't know.
1,500 pages.
He says.
Right. And AI will tell you, he's right.
And
I don't know.
If this sounds like that David and I are having a ridiculously stupid conversation, you should see the conversation that's happening on the Hill.
Yes.
And that's why nobody knows what's going to happen.
That's right. And for the record, you are right. This is, in fact, a stupid conversation. I am enjoying it tremendously.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
important,
having a great time,
but it's stupid.
This doesn't make any sense. Yeah, well, that's the point, really.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for electing Republicans. None of it's going to make any sense from this point onward.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Now, some really crazy things can happen if there's a government shutdown. And my recollection is this is one of those places where it becomes hazy as between what are the rules and what are the norms, because no one's ever seriously broken the norms on this stuff. So it's not clear from memory whether or not this happened because it has to and there's no way around it, or it's been an option. But in government shutdowns, my recollection is that there's a very strong role for the executive branch in determining who is exempt, who's an essential employee and who's not. Because normally if your department hasn't had an appropriations bill passed, and I guess no one has, in a shutdown, you close the doors and that's it. But, there are obviously very many roles in the federal government that most of us can pick off at the top of our head and say, well, you can't let, like, for instance, does the Secret Service go home and now everybody can show up and, attack the White House? No. Essential personnel. What about Congress? Well, unfortunately, they too are essential personnel, because if you don't let them go to work, then they can't pass a new bill to reopen the government. That's sort of logical. But it's usually...
Well, you can send Republicans home. Just leave the Democrats.
Yeah, well, and that's very often what kind of happens. They mentally check out. But, so and I imagine probably when it comes to legislative branch employees, the legislative branch speaks for itself in terms of who is essential, or at least can make those recommendations. It might be overridable by the executive because they are the ones actually, writing the checks and everything. But there's a lot of essential government functioning that has to happen in between one administration and another. And I mean, if you shut down the government until Trump is inaugurated, I guess you might begin by asking the question, who shows up to actually, hold the inauguration if the government is shut down? Like, we know who's inaugurating him, right? The government, but they're closed. So is he the president or is he not? Biden's term ends, but Trump's doesn't begin until he's inaugurated and takes the oath. What happens? I mean, it wouldn't happen. Ordinarily, you'd say, well, essential employees, certainly the Chief Justice can go to work and swear him in. Secret Service can guard the place, but I don't know about Capitol Police. You would normally say, it'd be wise to have them working, but would be interesting for the outgoing executive to say, nope, everybody's closed. In fact, while we're at it, is the National Archives open? Are they going to send the Electoral College votes over to Capitol Hill on January 6th? Yes or no?
That's essential.
I mean, I might say it's not. Screw it. It's not. And normally you say yes, but I say no. And now what? What about all the certificates of election that arrived at the clerk of the House's office and the secretary of the Senate telling us who's supposed to be in 119th Congress and who isn't? I don't know. Those envelopes don't get opened. The mailroom's closed. I'm sorry. We can't swear you in without one of those certificates of election. And
well, but maybe we can. See,
maybe,
here's the thing.
I don't know.
For the next 4 years, and this is just a public service announcement, David and I will be able to explain what happened, but we can't explain what's going to happen. We just can't,
right?
Because who the hell knows?
We will speculate recklessly.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
they'll
like change their mind. I mean, we might well have been right, except until 5 minutes ago when they changed their mind.
That's true too. You never know when you say something like this that it may happen behind closed doors that the incoming administration, because they're a little crazy, might be saying that they were definitely going to do all this stuff. And then by the time the show airs or finishes, someone has tweeted something else, and now
Well,
it's
I'll
not
give you an
happening.
example of how that works.
All right.
Completely different context.
Let's take it.
All right?
What?
So the House Ethics Committee.
That's
House
not even
Ethics
real.
Committee. Panel?
Yeah.
Committee
okay.
panel committee?
The
The Ethics Committee. That
told
group
me I could call it either one.
secretly votes to not release the Matt Gaetz report.
Yeah, secretly. How do you know
And
that?
so then they have
Yeah.
a vote pushed by Democrats, or at least Democrats are pushing to have a vote, that
Do it anyway?
brings it to the floor to force the release of the report.
I see, yes.
So the House Republicans don't want that.
No.
So they band together. They block a Democratic move to force the release of the report. Instead, what do? They return it to the Ethics Committee.
Those guys don't even know what they want to do with it.
But then the Ethics Committee secretly votes to release the report. Which
you asked us. That's quite a play.
Then, but they added a codicil to it.
Oh.
Which includes, of course, the
none of it is
spending for
true.
disasters as well as farm aid. But in addition to that, the Ethics Committee added, okay, but we're not releasing it until everybody goes home and we're the hell out of here.
We're going to light it on fire and leave
so
it on your
after
doorstep.
everybody goes home and we're out of Washington, this report will be released.
Interesting.
That's where it stands today. That's how you change your mind behind closed doors, and who the hell knows what's going on.
Huh. Well, all right.
Why did they vote not to release it the first time? Why did they vote to release it this time? What's going on here?
House Ethics Committee. You're weird. I guess I'll take a look at who's serving on the House Ethics Committee and see if I can figure anything out. I will say one thing about the committee.
And by the way, just as a technical note, in today's raft, O Stories is the first one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, who's on it here? Let's see. Michael Guest, David Joy. Here's the thing about the Ethics Committee. All right, I'm going to tell you who's on it. Maybe I'll tell you the thing first. The thing first is the Ethics Committee job sucks. Nobody wants it. It's a backwater generally. And it's they have to beg and plead for people to take the job, and people sometimes do out of a sense of obligation to their caucus or conference. Nobody really wants it, and as a result, so who's serving on the Ethics Committee? Michael Guest, you know him? Mississippi. No. David Joyce, you know him?
Vaguely.
Ohio. John Rutherford, where's he from? Florida. Andrew Garbarino. Well, I'll ask you where he's from. New York. That's not fair. But not because you knew it, but where else would Andrew Garbarino be from? And Michelle Fischbach. I think I heard her name once, from Minnesota. Those are the Republicans. On the Democratic side, Susan Wild, Veronica Escobar, Mark Desaulnier. How does he say? I don't know. I don't know how he says his name. Deborah Ross and Glenn Ivey. How many of those people could you even say I've heard their name once? Susan Wild, I just saw listed on something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I never heard their name. I can't tell you.
Zero.
So
presence.
You're saying it's not one of those things that senior people die to be on.
And it's also the sort of thing that you're talking about. Usually, well, you have to be kind of the kind of person who can be pushed into doing this. Come on, do us a favor, do this thing. So they're typically backbenchers, maybe a little mousy, a little bit resentful of being parked there, and now they need a big power play out of you, and you did your part, and then they screwed you and sent it back to you again. And you know what?
And by the way, we all hate kids anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
this guy, he's guilty of all this stuff. He's gross. We're tired of you pushing us around. Some of us aren't coming back again. Susan Wild, ranking member, I think. So, I'll tell you what, when we gavel out, here's the report. You don't like it? I'll tell you what, replace me on the committee. Oh, no, I'm finally out of here. Hooray. So, that's a kind of an interesting, I don't know that that's what's happening, but because there's an important issue, I thought I would basically speculate about it.
Right. So Matt Gaetz is already out with stuff like, listen, I was completely exonerated by Merrick Garland, and besides, it's my habit to pay a whole lot of money to young people for various and sundry things.
All right. Yeah.
That's a good one. I really like that one.
Yeah. I just like giving money to very young women because they need it. And I mean, I'm sure they do. It's tough to get a job sometimes. But, yeah. But then stop labeling it like for sex. Don't put that in your Venmo. I was just kidding.
Yeah.
You're not smart. And by the way, for all these F-ups, and I'm so...
It was probably a bad idea for him to put in, like in the little, why did you do this? Right. On the checks,
the memo.
You can write down on the bottom what the check is for.
Right.
He should not have put bimbos and blow.
Right, yes. Right. Sex, parentheses, not even good. Don't say that about. That's not even fair.
Yeah.
And by the way, he was saying
thought she was older. I mean, that's just not a good thing to write.
P.S. As he says,
but he's doing this. He's going out there and saying in advance, I paid money to young people, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And then the other part of the statement, I was a little young, reckless. My 30s, I womanized a little more than I should. I drank a little more than I should have. In my 30s, you know how it is. Well, when
30s
I was young
and reckless, I was George Bush.
And second of all, while he was young and reckless, he was a state representative. He's been in government his whole entire life. He's been an elected representative. He was a state assemblyman in Florida while he was doing, I was womanizing, drinking, and giving young girls money
he's a terrible
as an elected
person.
official.
And, of course, just because they said that and the report from the New York Times is that this is going to happen, there's absolutely no proof that this is actually going to happen. Because guess what? They could change their mind again.
That is true also. That is another good point. And he could change his mind. Maybe I wasn't womanizing. It's all lies again.
Yeah, exactly. Once it's not released, it's all lies. Once it's released, I can explain it because I just am in the habit of paying young people lots of money. Some of them happen to be women, like maybe 100% of them, but that's just like coincidence.
That's just a percentage.
It's like a penny. You flip it, and sometimes it's heads, sometimes it's tails.
Right.
Turns out all the people I was paying money to happen to be women.
Right. And all very young and, whatever.
Very, very young.
So, he's got no excuse. His 30s, as I said, was spent as an elected official and also as a member of a very highly political family. His father, too, was a state representative. So there was no point at which he shouldn't have had in mind, hey, I shouldn't be doing this. This will cause problems for myself and my family. But I'm very selfish and I like drugs and sex. So, what can I do? I'm 30. I mean, also you should maybe put it behind you when you're about 30, but not Matt Gaetz. So, this should be very exciting. I hope they don't change their minds. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, what did we say we start the show again? I'm just muttering about all the members of the ethics committee. If I had more time, I would be checking to see if any of them are retiring or were defeated for re-election, and so really don't care.
Which makes it easier to vote for stuff.
Right.
Like if you hate Gates, well, on my way out, here's a present for you.
So really that would be the Republicans we'd be looking at, and I don't know. And then I was struck again by the fact that, one, there is a person named Andrew Garbarino, and he's in Congress, and then it just made me think.
He's a sweat hug.
Yeah, it just made me think of Andrew Vinny Garbarino. It's Barbarino, but Garbarino is pretty close. I guess that's... and it was Barbarino, wasn't it?
It was.
All right, so they just switched the names. It's just really like one of those things like, I'm not Vinny Barbarino, I'm Vinny Garbarino.
Well, whatever.
I see.
Let's talk a little bit about international stuff.
Yeah, all right. Sure.
Just for a minute,
Pick a country.
I want to point out that Charles Lister, our Syrian expert, has pointed out a couple of things which are quite interesting.
Oh.
Interesting point number one is that both in Homs in the middle of the country, and in
Yes.
Latakia, which is
Okay.
up to the northwest and is Alawite
Northwest.
Assad territory,
Okay.
which is also, I believe, where the one of the Russian bases is. That's where the
I believe you have mentioned it.
Airport is.
Airport. Okay. The Hertz rental
Tartus
desk
is
is
where
there.
the naval base is.
Oh, okay.
Both of them are celebrating Christmas.
Well, all right.
And it's a wonderful thing, not just because celebrating Christmas is a wonderful thing, but because they're allowed to.
That's right. And
so there
they're
are all
glad
these
the
videos
war is
of
over.
Christmas tree lightings and
Now
such.
there won't be a war on Christmas.
And the fireworks aren't, from like overhead bombing.
Yes.
It's just like ordinary fireworks. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, don't fire your weapons in the air. Dangerous.
None
Now
of
that
that.
you've won the war, you want
None of
to
that,
settle
just,
down.
sparklers and things. And,
Great.
and trees being lit and big stars at the top of the Christmas trees.
Well,
and such.
Merry Christmas to those who are celebrating Christmas because they know what it is. Merry Christmas to those who are just trying to celebrate something and they
Yeah,
just
it's
like their
within the
neighbor's holiday. Terrific.
Charles Lister also points out, referencing a Syria Weekly piece, that in
Syria
just
Weekly.
the past week, the new government in Syria has engaged directly with senior officials from the UN, the US, the UK, France, Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Egypt, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, Iraq, Italy, Czech Republic, Norway, Russia, and Iran, and more. So this
Mars.
is of interest because, like, they're doing diplomacy like real governments do.
Yes. Not
And
even
so,
ISIS.
that raises the question, which Chris Murphy, my senator, raised. A statement calling for suspending sanctions to support Syria aid and reconstruction. He says there's really no reason for the U.S. to be stubbornly reluctant to lift decades-old sanctions that were constructed to pressure a government no longer in power. One of the other things about government is that if something's in place, it's very hard to get rid of it. The
Yeah, I
reason
guess
for
so.
why it was in place in the first place may no longer exist.
Right.
And so now you have these sanctions and also terror designations against the new government, which is doing diplomacy. Do you get rid of them? Well, let me give you a bunch of reasons why we shouldn't, at least not right away.
Okay.
All of which are stupid, all of which are bogus, all of which are lazy, all of which are like, why?
I thought you were going to give
Why
them to
aren't
us.
you more nimble? Why don't you, like, move with the times?
What? You remember you started this off about being the United States government.
Exactly right. So it won't happen. I'm just saying that this is why Chris Murphy's saying,
But
you know
Elon
what,
Musk
guys?
could do it.
Let me bring this up now because it's something that maybe we'll get around to doing in about 2 months.
Yeah, well, you have to get the ball
And that would be
rolling,
lightning
I
speed.
guess. Yeah, and I guess when you're imposing sanctions, I'm just imagining you want to stay away from, actually tying it to Bashar al-Assad personally, even though that's the real reason for it, just because if you say, well, the sanctions lifted the moment he's no longer in power. Well, suppose he dies and his henchman takes over. I don't want to lift those sanctions. There's more of a process to it. So you wouldn't just design it just to be personally tied to that guy unless it was his own personal crimes you were worried about. But so anyway, yeah, I guess you're right. You'll have to change terror designations because some people who were once kind of ISIS have decided not to be, and it's a good thing.
Well, isn't the point of the sanctions and terror designations to force them to do that? And then when they do that, aren't you supposed to acknowledge that?
Yes.
You may call it a reward or not,
sure, why not?
Because your opponent will at the time that you're going to run against them. But nonetheless, isn't it to nudge them in what you consider to be the proper direction?
Yes. But then you tell them, well, patience, how long did your Civil War take? It takes a while. We'll get around to it.
I understand you did everything we asked you to do in your war-torn country where people are being decimated left and right. But I have an election, so I can't do it until later.
Well, they certainly understand. They understand that it happens. They're not happy about it.
Well,
but
didn't you just have one? You're not going to have one for another 2 years. Yes, but it's in 2 years the one I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the one I won. I'm worried about the next one.
Well, I'm sure that my guess is that there are certain restrictions that can be lifted by executive action that are written into written into the law. I'm sure that they didn't say to them that one thing you don't do if you're worried about your elections is say, I personally, as a member of Congress, need to vote directly on whether or not someone is designated a terrorist or not. Those are the things you push off onto, unelected bureaucrats, the deep state that everyone hates.
Right.
Like the Ethics Committee.
In Murphy's statement, he says, most immediately, the U.S. should temporarily suspend sanctions that hamper the much-needed surge in humanitarian assistance and reconstruction that will be necessary to help support the Syrian people in the short term. Officials within HTS, that's the new government, have publicly stated their intent to govern inclusively, and Syrians in the world will be watching over the coming months ahead to see whether they intend to follow through on that commitment.
Right.
Yes,
Don't
so
say
they've said all the right
though.
things. They're engaging in diplomacy. They're doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but what about 6 months from now? Well, we'll see 6 months from now. Well, what should we do now? Mm-hmm. Well, Chris Murphy says we should act now, not just sit around and wait.
Yeah,
but
well,
that's not how things work.
That's true. Secondly, I guess the follow-up question is to Chris Murphy. All right, who's responsible for taking that action? Now, my guess is it's actually not the Senate, but maybe they could make a recommendation or something. Or maybe the president doesn't move without a recommendation from the Senate or a resolution from
the Senate,
both houses.
The president can ask for one.
Yeah, that's true.
The president can either just do it or he can turn around and ask for one. So
Biden,
give him some cover.
I would think Biden and his team are actually it's probably reasonable to expect that they might in fact do that before the 20th.
Yeah.
So
this is some stuff that might actually happen before then, so I just thought it was of interest.
Yeah,
and
speaking
it's also
of good
Chris
for Murphy to call
for it. It was a good way to introduce his name. Yeah. This is a interesting podcast that Greg Sargent had.
This is an interesting podcast.
Is here.
All right.
So that
another podcast. Someone else's. Okay.
Someone else's podcast. Chris Murphy's ominous new warning about Trump, which nails it. An interview with Senator Chris Murphy, who argues Trump's attacks on democracy are accelerating as we speak, that the media is folding, and that Democrats must sound the alarm before it's too late. And before we get into this, I have to say, based on just the last little piece of news that we were talking about in terms of Syria.
Yeah.
Trump beat Harris. Small number of votes, close election. He won. You sometimes ask yourself, I sometimes ask myself, how is it that somebody this bad could win? And part of the answer is our discussion about, well, you know how the government works. How can they possibly get rid of sanctions that we don't need? People are tired of the government not doing the things it's supposed to do. Yes, we understand government isn't nimble. It never will be. It never has been. But nonetheless, people want it to be. People don't want prices to be high. People want stuff that needs to be done. And when it's not done, it gives people like Trump an opening because he claims only I can do it.
Right.
And for some reason, he's a good enough salesman to get people to think that maybe that's true.
Yes.
Or even if it's not true, I certainly don't like the fact that our current government isn't doing it. So I'm going to vote against them. So, in other words, you have to do stuff. If you are in power, you have to do stuff. And if you keep coming up with excuses as to why you can't do stuff, whether it's loose lips or something else, people are going to get tired of it and vote you out, just telling you.
Yeah.
What about the seniority stuff? Isn't that how things are supposed to work? Well, it's fine if it gets stuff done. If it doesn't get stuff done, then do it differently. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, that's...
You haven't. So... as it happens. No, you haven't. Oh, well, look over there.
Yeah, exactly right.
We find these things out all the time. And there might be something like that going on with Chris Murphy in Syria. It may very well be the case that everybody who knows anything about this situation knows very well that the Biden team is already working furiously to move this sluggish government to do this.
Now I can say I pushed them.
Yeah, exactly. So now I call for
really
it.
Influential.
See, I won. Yeah. That could be it, too. And just to throw that out there, it may very well be that the Biden administration is already working on it and needs cover for it and ask Chris Murphy, will you please call for it? And then people will say, yeah, we should do that. So then we can roll it out. Yeah, I will do that. I will help you.
The administration said, we don't want to. We're the blob.
Right.
And, we don't. And Chris Murphy said, well, I need to get some publicity.
That could be true, too.
One never really knows. So there's always a backstory. We don't always know what it is.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But we will speculate about it here so that you know that you don't ever really know.
Right. So Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, sounded in an extraordinary warning this week, writes Greg Sargent, after a House GOP report recommended that the FBI investigate Liz Cheney for activities related to the January 6th committee. Murphy pointed out in a powerful social media thread that Donald Trump is clearly putting in place a plan to cripple our democracy, one we might never recover from.
Yes.
What made Murphy's warning particularly interesting is how he connected a series of dots to show the plan coming together and accelerating right before our eyes, even before Trump has taken office. And this is what he said. What? After Barry Loudermilk released a second interim report on January 6th recommending criminal investigation into Liz Cheney, Chris Murphy wrote, "It's happening right in front of our eyes. It's accelerated rapidly in the last 24 hours. Not sure why everybody doesn't see this. Can I take a minute to connect the dots on how Trump is putting into action a plan to cripple our democracy in a way we may never recover from?"
I say yes, you may. Go ahead, sir.
Yes? Okay, well then go ahead. He wasn't kidding when he said Democrats were the number one threat to America and needed to be dealt with by law enforcement and military. Today's House Republican referral to Liz Cheney for criminal prosecution shows you the plan.
Okay.
Who will stand in the way? Not DOJ, not Kash Patel.
No.
He was chosen to lead the FBI because he wants to do this, not the courts.
Agreed.
Trump's pliant DOJ can handpick a jurisdiction with a MAGA judge. Not every Trump opponent will fold, but many will. If you have a family at home, are you really going to stand up to Trump if there's a chance you could end up in jail? History shows the selective prosecution of regime's opposition has a broad, chilling effect. Second part of Trump's plan is to use the White House to destroy the free media. Today's lawsuit against the Des Moines Register, just because they released a poll showing a close race in Iowa, is stunning. We shouldn't pretend this is normal. Already you see how the big media companies are giving in. ABC paid Trump $15 million. I'm happy to tell you we covered a lot of this on the show.
Yes.
Even though his defamation suit had no merit. Bezos told the Post, that's the Washington Post owner, to not endorse against Trump. MSNBC is up for sale because Comcast doesn't want to get in trouble. Sometimes Trump will win these suits because he controls the DOJ, but other times he doesn't care.
Yeah.
After he lost one case, he said, I did it to make that person's life miserable, which I'm happy about. And gladly admits it's about intimidation.
Really
Trump's also said he'll use the FEC and regulatory agencies, all of which will be run by his blind loyalists, to intimidate news organizations. Even if he uses this power rarely, media companies have already shown they're reluctant to put up a fight. Is there a chance this is all show and bluster? Maybe. But the developments of just the last few days, ABC's bogus settlement, the referral to Cheney for prosecution, Trump's suit against the Des Moines Register, all point to this being very, very real.
Yes. Was that all, Sergeant?
That was all Chris Murphy from his tweets that Sergeant referred to.
I see.
Which I have at the very end of our long list here.
Murphy made another point in the middle of all that, which was, I thought, real important. Maybe it's still yet to come. But if not, which was about the Liz Cheney thing, just saying also when the media was reporting it, they just reported it straight. Like, oh, well, Barry Loudermilk's report calls for a criminal referral of Liz Cheney, and they just sort of reported it. And this was an opportunity to point out that's not a thing that you can do. It's not a legislative function.
He says, I read most of the headlines. The headlines were standard boilerplate. It was
very good.
House refers Liz Cheney for criminal prosecution, but you have to dig into the report to find out it's made up.
Yeah, that's not a thing that you can do.
Under the Constitution, criminalize conduct done in your official duties. That's speech and debate clause.
Yeah, official duties. Where have we heard that before? As an immunity.
But even if you wipe the speech and debate clause out, they're literally just making up things they say she did. They claim she pressured one of the witnesses to lie. Not true. There's no facts that allege it. They just made it up.
Okay.
It's a bogus claim on the merits, and it's also unenforceable under the Constitution, which won't stop Kash Patel from acting.
No. Yeah, so I thought it was an excellent point, in addition to which I saw it, so I know about it, so that's why it was so excellent.
Yeah. So, and Murphy says, we're not talking about signs that the media are folding. They are folding. Signs?
Yeah, right. I mean, the sign is, look, there's a fold. I duly noted. Okay.
Right. So I just thought that was
good point. Also
quite good and worth. I like Chris Murphy. I think he's very good.
Well,
I know that
he's a Dem
sort of
from
on the
Connecticut.
cusp between how old is he? He's kind of older.
Is he?
He's not old compared to Congress, which is like 90. You
right.
know. So
he looks young.
He's youngish in that regard. People think of him as too moderate and not radical enough, but listen to what he says about some of this stuff. It's pretty it's about as radical as you can get and still get elected. Which is my definition.
In the sense
how far should you go?
Now, you get a lot more leeway for being radical if you're also right about it, I guess. But,
well, that's part of it, but getting elected is actually more part of it, and they get that, and that's how they act, and that's what drives them.
He's a Dem from Connecticut. I think that might be why you like him so much.
Maybe. But
he's also right, and it was a good series of points.
He's no Richard Blumenthal, and that's a good thing.
Right, he's no Joe Lieberman.
Just because he's a Dem from Connecticut doesn't mean, okay, well, I could see him as president someday.
Right. Well,
a couple of Dems
has there ever been
I can't.
Ever been a president from Connecticut?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, there you have it.
I'm no expert on this stuff until I have a chance to look it up and then pretend I'm knowledgeable about it 10 minutes later.
I can't think of any, but, that doesn't mean
Joe Lieberman wasn't. I mean, I could tell you that.
Right, and he wasn't president.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Democrat.
He was from Connecticut.
He was not president.
Yeah, okay, that's true. I agree. All right, well, that's not really the point. What was the point was that there was a Dem from Connecticut who said some things, and a guy named Greg said they were very useful points.
Right. So Greg Sargent says, my next question, which is about your party. In the face of all of this, it seems like Democrats are adopting this posture of strategic caution. To put it very bluntly, are enough Democrats saying what you said on Twitter or X, or are they saying it loudly enough? And Murphy says no and no. And I'll give you an example. Having watched Trump during his first term, it was never infrastructure week. He was never serious about Parkland, about doing gun control. Why do we all of a sudden decide to take this government efficiency task force seriously? It's not a department. It's being run by two billionaires, people who have no idea how important basic government services like Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits are to regular people. Regular people will find out when the government shuts down. But there are a lot of Democrats openly saying, well, I want to work with them. I want to sit down with this group. Which gives the appearance of something other than just a TV show. So, yes, on nominations, I don't think enough Democrats are sounding the red alert. And when regular people see Democrats treating all of this as normal, they start to believe it's normal. It's not, and we have to start telegraphing that to people.
Okay.
So I like him. I think he's good. I think he's fighting in a way that is reasonable without being over the top.
Yeah, I think so. He's certainly not over the top in my view. It's a difficult thing. I mean, he calls for the things that lots of people are calling for, and that's great. And there is still looming out there the call for not helping Republicans get out of their own way, and that's a different kind of thing, but it's going to be difficult to reconcile that sometimes. But yeah, I thought he made great points, and Greg Sargent was right to call them out as extraordinarily important, and you were right to read them to us.
And this last thing here is just Ben Wickler adding to the conversation about what Democrats should be doing. He says a ton of voters only get their news about Democrats from Republicans. To fight back, we should build up independent progressive media, reach out to voters, like Greg Sargent. Reach out to voters who don't watch political news and go on offense on conservative outlets. That's why I go on Fox News, break the bubble. So don't complain about going on Fox News. Buttigieg was very good about doing that and getting news out to people. And Ben Wickler's pretty good at it too. And I think that's just stuff you should do.
Okay.
Which is not the same thing as cooperating with them or saying, okay, this is normal.
True.
Go on Fox and say it's not normal.
You could do that. That's the thing. I mean, it takes a certain touch to do it right and to do it well.
But Buttigieg was the best, and Wickler's pretty good.
Okay. Is he busy the next couple of years?
Ben Wickler or Pete Buttigieg?
Pete Buttigieg.
No, I think he's got time.
Okay. I mean, he's looking for a next gig.
I don't think he's ready to run for governor yet.
Okay. So
he hasn't lived there long enough.
Right. So I guess we can look for him to do it. Now, Ben Wickler's looking to get busy for the next 4 years and in a job that would probably require a lot of that work. So I hope that happens as well. Speaking of people not busy, I mentioned the other day that Herschel Walker has found himself a new job as ambassador to the Bahamas, which sounds nice. And it was noted in passing, not yesterday, but actually in a text from my dad. It was asking what happens as everybody's getting jobs, all the losing candidates getting jobs. Mark Robinson not so far landing a job in the new Trump administration.
They should give him Voice of America, don't you think?
Well, that's taken.
Not Carrie Lake. I mean, they should give him like the overall oversight.
I figured.
Oh, by the way, I misspoke. Buttigieg is Michigan. That's Chasten's
what did we think he was
hometown,
from?
not Minnesota.
Oh, I see. All right, no, that's
Minnesota.
correct.
I meant Michigan.
Yeah, and no disrespect to
either
Minnesota. I'm sure they'd be happy.
But I don't think he's ready to run.
Maybe not. Oh, it's certainly not from Minnesota. Anyway,
Yeah, you got to live there. He doesn't live there.
I did think, though, by the way, I just wanted to, in case, Donald Trump, in case you're listening, I don't think there's an ambassador to nude Africa yet. So you should name, you should absolutely say, fine, why not? There's never been one. And why is that? Because the deep state is afraid to name an ambassador to nude Africa. So we're going to do this in the first, he was Martin Luther King on steroids a couple weeks ago. So why no job? It would be interesting to be shut out of a job merely because there's allegations of some sort of sexual impropriety against you. Because, I don't know, there's a lot of white guys that are living that down just fine. But what can I tell you? They were just using you, Mark. Sorry. And the leopard has eaten your face.
Anyway, there's an
so
Axios
far,
theory out.
Anyway,
This is going to be my concluding piece here.
All right.
Scoop.
Scoop.
Chuck Schumer's picks for Senate Democratic ranking members, which is to say they're in the minority in the Senate.
Right.
And who are the senators who he has as the ranking members? Murray.
It's not just up to him, you know.
Appropriations.
Yeah.
Warren. Banking. Cantwell. Commerce.
Yeah.
Heinrich. Energy. Wyden. Finance. Shaheen. Foreign Relations. Not Chris Murphy. Shaheen. Sanders. Help. Committee, Peters, Homeland Security, Warner, Intelligence, Durbin, Judiciary.
Yay.
Durbin, Judiciary. Well, I mean, it's hard to oust him, but, nothing's happening with Judiciary.
Who else is
He's
on
in the minority anyway.
Yes, that's true. I mean, so he stands there and says he's disappointed. I guess it really doesn't matter that much. Murphy, did you think Murphy was in line for foreign affairs?
No, I'm just saying, you can be a senior influential senator and still be like 15 years younger than anybody else.
Well, yeah, it's the Senate. I mean, Strom Thurmond is still there. Many people do not know this.
Yeah.
He's in the basement.
He's now 119,
with Milton.
and he's the second oldest member.
Did you see it's a very widely circulated Onion thing the last couple of days? It actually was, they were using it, I think, most people to punctuate the Connolly AOC thing, but I think the headline was something like, it was a picture of a skeleton in a suit, but a skeleton found clinging to a desk in the Senate office is expected to run for a 19th term, or something like that. It was, well, that's the Senate for you. Okay, no change at Judiciary. There's not going to be a great deal that can be done, but maybe you want a shoutier person to lose than Dick Durbin, but I guess he's...
And by the way, this is breaking news from Georgia. Georgia Court of Appeals, Fulton County DA Fani Willis is disqualified from the 2020 election case against Trump for actual conflict of interest.
Well, not that it will make a great deal of difference now,
but
that was not helpful. Yeah, I mean, they're real. He did wrong, and it's worth finding out about it, but I guess, all right. Well, that wasn't great.
It's appearance of impropriety.
Yeah.
It's not that there was actual, but that was good enough, and so we're going to apply it.
Well, it's good enough for a Democrat.
The indictments remain. She's just off the case.
Okay. They'll probably find a prosecutor who's quite capable. Too bad, I guess.
I don't really care who the prosecutor is, so long as they prosecute.
I guess there's that. But yeah, they'll be making hay out of that for a little while.
Anthony Michael Crease says, this Georgia Court of Appeals ruling is exceptionally bad. The entire point of the interlocutory appeal was to articulate or clarify a standard of law that was unclear. They did neither. The majority simply decided they wanted to be Judge McAfee and do his job. Mm-hmm.
That's, I guess, not surprising. Good point for the record. But, yeah, people will probably at this point say, not something that we have the bandwidth to fight over, and it'll go down in history as, oh, my God, she did something wrong. And we're not really sure, just because the court decided it, that the court knew what the hell it was talking about. And on the law, apparently not.
Right. And then also, just to finish, because this is all sort of breaking news, Jake Sherman is now reporting, as of this moment,
wow,
In my conversations with many Republicans this morning, there's a lot of anger that Mike Johnson didn't hold a vote yesterday before Trump opened his mouth. They say they could have passed the bill and put it behind them. Would have been messy, but they could have done it. He may have screwed Johnson personally.
Yeah.
But in Johnson's leadership, there's some anger about this move.
That's interesting. Of course, I'll just comment on that. Had they held the vote yesterday, not knowing what was coming from Trump, they would have been out there screaming, "We have rules, 72 hours. We haven't read this bill. You can't hold the vote." Yeah.
But if they pass it, it's screaming and yelling after the fact that it passed.
Right.
It hasn't passed, so we may wind up getting a shutdown.
Yeah, so before they knew that Trump was going to do this, though, they would have been saying, "You can't hold the vote now." Oh, you can? Oh, okay. Well, Trump just said, why didn't we hold the vote? Yeah, all right, fine. Okay, they're right, but they're also wrong.
Yeah, well, too late.
Yep. What else? Nothing?
What else?
It's time to
Mike
go.
Johnson doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
Anyway, talk to you Monday.
All right. Thank you for staying the whole
Monday,
time. Right. Monday. Sure. Why not?
Isn't that Christmas week or something?
It's like 12 days. I can't be off all of this Christmas
12
thing.
days of Christmas?
Yeah. I don't know.
We could do some reason for being off every one of the 12 days.
That's right. It's an advent calendar. Why are we
2
here?
reasons today, 5 days tomorrow, seven reasons the next,
Right. Partridges.
And on the 12th day, there's 12 reasons why. 12.
That's right. They're like sort of, and then they'll sing the reason. We'll recount them all for you. There's ladies dancing. There's lords leaping. Every sort of reason you could want. But yeah, I guess Wednesday next week would ordinarily be just another show in a secular world, but it's Christmas all over again. And I guess we'll probably take a short break, even though, you'll all be like Thanksgiving. Some of you will be interested in perhaps tuning in just for something to do. But on the other hand, I don't know. No one wants to hear this around the Christmas tree, I guess. I don't know. I would have to ask Christmas trees how they feel about it. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. And, now we're forced to leave. Not really. We could ignore all the rules, but why do that? We'll see you on Monday, though, in the run-up to Christmas, if you're willing. How's that?
Well, let's try it.
Right. I mean, just because he shows up doesn't really mean he's willing, but he may do it anyway. Yep. Okay, great. We'll see you then. Musical interlude now takes us to the break, and we'll have 1 minute to regroup and look through Pocket and decide what to share with you if it's still operative, because things are changing at every moment. Okay. I'll check around on social media for a minute to see whether everything has been stood on its head or Trump is now against the shutdown. But I think we've laid it out for everybody. Thanks, Greg. And we'll be back with you in a minute. Hang on. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So let's see, what else is new? Shall we take a tour of the news? Let's see. We'll read over. I thought it might be wise to take a look at what the Washington Post briefly had to say about the state of play, at least as late as 41 minutes ago on the government shutdown front. Government shutdown nears after Trump and Musk kill compromise. Congress has dwindling time left to find a new way to extend the current deadline of midnight Saturday, which most of us know of midnight Friday. But, that's one of those issues of confusion. The minute after 11:59 p.m. Friday is in fact midnight Saturday. But because Saturday has just started and midnight seems like late at night on whatever night it happens, I tend to think of it the other way around. But they're quite correct and fine, even if confusing. And by the way, can we get rid of midnight as well as we're getting rid of either daylight savings time, if you ask Donald Trump, or standard time, if you ask Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and whoever else. Can we get rid of midnight or find some clarifying way of figuring out to which day midnight really belongs? I mean, we have. It belongs to Saturday. The coming day gets midnight. But that seems so dumb. Could we undo it? Sure, why not? Act of Congress. What was happening here? Jacob Bogej and Mariana Sotomayor were reporting on the apparent death of the compromise CR. Federal government is careening toward a weekend government shutdown deadline as congressional Republicans, egged on by President Elon Musk, as many people are saying, but they say President-elect Donald Trump and Elon Musk, as they feud over legislation, not the two of them necessarily, not that we know of, but Congress and congressional Republicans and everybody else, egged on by these two idiots, feud over legislation to keep agencies open over the Christmas holiday, which, during which they'll be closed, at least for the Christmas holiday. Republicans on Wednesday rejected a plan by House Speaker Mike Johnson for a 3-month stopgap funding extension called a continuing resolution, or CR, in case you didn't know. But you listen to the show, so you do. With more than $100 billion in aid for natural disaster survivors, bipartisan health care policy changes, and other unrelated provisions. What an interesting way of putting it. $100 billion in aid for natural disaster survivors. Well, true. The people who were killed in natural disasters will not be getting any of this money. But, it's not for survivors like, congratulations, you survived. It's, recovery money. But, all right. Well, I don't know. They were so precise about midnight Saturday that I expected more. House Republican leaders made no significant they clearly are, and they did say this was edited or updated just 41 minutes ago. So it's a live page. They're editing on the fly. You can't catch everything. So I guess that explains the imprecision. But then it also explains why it now says House Republican leaders made no significant process overnight. It's progress that they didn't make overnight. Close enough. It's spelled right, so it didn't get caught. So no significant process used to make any significant progress overnight in their efforts to fund the government and avoid this shutdown. Two people familiar with the negotiations said, I'm not familiar with the negotiations, but I also said it. Speaking on condition of anonymity, which I am not, to share private deliberations, to which I am not privy. Thank you. Okay. And scrapping Johnson's plan, and it's not clear that that's, what is going to end up happening, but certainly the plan to pass it smoothly and move on has been scrapped. Republicans cast doubt on his ability to maintain the speaker's gavel in next year's Congress. Johnson must run for the position again when the new House is sworn in on January 3rd. If the new House is sworn in on January 3rd. Well, yeah, again, just here, more baseless speculation. And I'm just putting it out there because at this point, who the hell cares? The Republicans have thrived for decades on putting out baseless speculation like this. There's no real reason to believe that this would be the case because of what I was telling you earlier, that most of the time when you have a government shutdown, you just say, well, the things that are essential. They're going to go ahead. But processing people's Social Security claims, processing people's Social Security checks and mailing them sometimes has been off the books. Well, sorry, the government's closed. It's one of the ways to make people feel the pain and pressure the government to reopen. But I have also seen it done, I believe, sometimes that they have said, well, no, cutting Social Security checks and mailing them is an essential function, and you're going to go ahead and do that. National parks. The Rangers aren't going to open up the national parks. You can get away with that one as being non-essential. But like TSA, well, that's essential. Air traffic controllers, usually deemed essential. Secret Service protection for the president, vice president, president-elect, vice president-elect, Speaker of the House, whoever, right? Usually deemed essential. Capitol Police, deemed essential. Capitol staffers, mixed bag. Usually members are instructed, well, you want your chief of staff and maybe one other person, they're essential. Everybody else, non-essential, which means only that we won't pay them during that time. But, well, congressional staffers are paid once a month anyway. So usually the shutdown is over by the time their paycheck is supposed to come around and they get paid retroactively. Not always, but sometimes. But, you get to keep one or two staffers with you. But this is all subject to interpretation, and they could just say, you know what, this time we're just going to say air traffic controllers not exempted. Holiday travel completely paralyzed. Why? Because the Trump shutdown. Could you be doing this? Yeah. Should you be doing this? Maybe. It's one of those things where you could say, we could make a hell of a lot of trouble for Donald Trump. Yes, we want to do that. You're going to inflict pain on regular people who are on your side even. Do we want to do this? Didn't we just conclude that maybe we want to get out of the way of Republicans hurting themselves? Well, did we conclude that? That was actually something I read in The Bulwark, and they're not Democrats. Was it a good idea? Yeah. Has it been adopted in some Democratic circles? Yes. But for probably limited application. But could you, here's the speculation, could you say, to hell with it, nobody's exempt, or almost nobody is exempt. Nobody is a essential employee. So what does that mean, right? Where were we on this? Johnson must run for the position again when the new House is sworn in on January 3rd. Who has to swear in the House on January 3rd? Well, first, remember how the mechanics of these opening days go? We keep stressing it every 2 years or so. The clerk of the House convenes the House on January 3rd for the purposes of swearing in new members and then having the new members vote to install a new speaker. And then from there on, the speaker takes charge of running the House. So is the clerk of the House an essential employee? Yes, usually. What about this time? I don't know. What if F you? No. And what if it is me? Maybe it is the clerk of the House, but none of the people who work for the clerk of the House who open the certificates of election that are supposed to be offered up as proof that, yes, the people before you are, in fact, those who are supposed to make up the 119th Congress. Suppose there's no one there to do that. Suppose they refuse to show up and do that. Not because they're partisan, but because they've been furloughed because Trump shut down the government. But how could Trump shut down the government? He's not even president yet. You all saw it happen, right? So tell the truth. Tell how it happened. So suppose they can't open the certificates of election. I mean, ultimately what happens, I guess, at that point is the House, the terms end January 3rd. And the new ones are meant to begin January 3rd. But everybody in the House is basically not in the House come January 3rd. Then, if they've been reelected to the House, their certificates of election are opened and examined and read into the record and accepted, and then they're sworn in. But supposing nobody does any of that work, no House of Representatives, no speaker, nobody, no nothing. That's the way it's supposed to work in the House. Could a crazy-ass Trump Supreme Court say that can't be right? No. They could do anything. What about over in the Senate? Well, only 1/3 of the Senate got reelected or stood for reelection this time around. The other 2/3 of the Senate are in the middle of their 6-year terms, and that remains the case no matter what happens. But suppose nobody in the Secretary of the Senate's office is there to open, examine, and okay the certificates of election. You got a Senate of whatever it is now, 66 or 67, I'm not sure which. You got to look it up. You're looking here, if you want to do the research, for the class of the Senate. The Senate is divided into 3 classes. Each class runs, or is due for re-election every 2 years on a rotating basis, right? So that everybody serves the 6-year terms. So you would have to go look that up. A quorum of the Senate is just a majority, so that's not a problem. 2/3 of the Senate will still be in office and can convene the Senate and can operate no matter what happens, if they consider themselves to be exempt employees. And there, you kind of have to do it right, like I said, because otherwise, if they're furloughed too, then you'll never reopen the government, which might be like, Trump might say that. Elon Musk says, screw it, let's consider them after January 20th to not be essential employees and just operate without Congress. But we have a problem in that, okay, so let's say you can't swear in members, right? So the answer there is there's still 2/3 of the Senate so they can operate, but there's no House of Representatives. So you can't really do anything that requires bicameralism. And by the way, one of the roles in the early formation of a new Congress after a presidential election year is they convene and They agree to move forward under the leadership of a speaker, but there's no Speaker of the House now. And then they're going to have the January 6th counting of the Electoral College votes to decide, to verify who will be president, who will be inaugurated president come January 20th. But they can't convene to do that. What happens? Is Donald Trump president or not? Well, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. In this case, Republicans will say, of course he is. Everyone knows who won the election. This is just a formality. Wasn't it Democrats who on January 6, 2021 were saying this whole thing is a formality and that's why the vice president can't change directions? Yeah, it is a formality. So he can't change who the Electoral College voted for. And he can't unilaterally decide whether or not to open the Electoral College vote certifications and announce them. It's just a ministerial role. But to whom is he supposed to be, over whom, who should he be presiding over in doing a joint session of Congress? What if there's no House of Representatives? What if there's only 2/3 of the Senate? What if the people who were supposed to open and examine these certificates and tell them whether or not they're regular in form and lawfully given or whatever the magic words are, suppose they don't do that? Well, I mean, I guess technically at that point, if you can't verify you can't read out the Electoral College votes and accept them on behalf of Congress, then although everybody is, supposedly, quote unquote, knows that Donald Trump has, quote unquote, been elected president, no, he hasn't. And can you administer the oath? Well, for one thing, one of the other things that happens to have an inauguration is a legislative function. Sure, it's the inauguration of the executive branch, but the legislative branch is responsible for A, hosting, and B, convening the inauguration. That's why it's held on Capitol Hill. Nobody ever asked questions about that before, right? This is the executive branch. Why do they head to the legislative branch for inauguration? It's because they're accepting the certification of the legislative branch that you won. Can Donald Trump say, to hell with it, I'm having my inauguration at Mar-a-Lago? He could try. He can. Maybe that's enough for people. Donald Trump says he wants to do it. He's supposed to be the president. Get out of the way. But it would be an unique inauguration, the only one to which the president-elect has never been invited by Congress for some strange reason. Would that matter to people? I don't know. Should it matter to people? Yes, it should. Form matters, process matters, but they don't care about that stuff. So would you be able to brush right past it and do it and have people accept it? Maybe. I don't know. But everywhere else, the rule has been, well, until you take the oath, that's it. You're not president, right? And I know every once in a while Republicans, and when it's in their interest, say the oath doesn't matter, the oath doesn't matter. And I keep proving that the oath does matter. But, okay. So supposing then that January 3rd, they can't swear in a House. So they can't convene a joint session on January 6th, so they don't count the Electoral College votes, or if they do, it doesn't matter because it's not in compliance with the Electoral Count Act, not in compliance with the Constitution. And let's say nobody can convene the Supreme Court to rule otherwise at that point, and it now rolls around, it's January 20th, and there's nobody there to invite Trump and Vance to an inauguration, nobody to hold it, nobody to staff it, and it doesn't happen. What's one interpretation of what happens if on January 20th the inauguration doesn't go forward? There's a vacancy in the presidency. Biden's not president until the next president shows up and gets sworn in. Biden is president until noon on January 20th. The end. Same with Kamala Harris. She'd be out. So what then? Well, as most of us know, I guess in the offhand sort of way, who's next in the line of succession to the presidency? And of course, the answer is, anybody? Speaker of the House. Don't have one. Couldn't get one together on January 3rd, either because the government is shut and we screwed around and decided to FO and find out what happens when there's no House of Representatives, or when the government is closed and we close the clerk of the House and just say, sorry, we can't convene the House of Representatives, or because they said, to hell with that, we're going to deem the clerk to be essential and swear everybody in just as usual, but we couldn't elect a speaker because we're idiots. And we're going to screw around. Now, they didn't take them as long as January 20th with McCarthy, even though they had 15 ballots, right? Didn't they kind of do it just before the 20th? It didn't matter because there was no inauguration going on, but I think it took them less time than that. Even so, supposing for whatever reason there's no Speaker of the House and all of this stupid speculation comes to pass, what happens then? The answer then, if you're just following normal procedure and saying laws mean things, so let's use them. Congratulations, President Patty Murray, as President pro tem of the Senate. You win. You're the big winner. You're the president. Isn't that great? Problem is we can't inaugurate you because, of course, all of the essential employees are no longer available. So that would be kind of wacky and weird. But by the way, just by way of, safeguarding all the, the succession to the presidency, my instructions to all current cabinet secretaries, Biden cabinet secretaries, tender no resignations at this point, because some of you may be in line of succession after Patty Murray, if God knows what happens here, but stick around. Ordinarily, I would say, you don't have to worry about it. Don't make Trump fire you. What normally happens, by the way, president has a hard and definite end to their term in office, January 20th at noon. Not the case for cabinet secretaries. Ordinarily, they resign either before inauguration or they tender a letter of resignation that, is available for the new president to accept in the first moments of their presidency so that they can clear the way for their own nominee. Sometimes they stick around until the new nominee is confirmed. If it's a more normal administration, they might do that, but this administration probably not. They want everybody gone, and who knows how they're going to handle the interim. Doesn't even matter because it's the least of our problems. But it would be interesting if nobody tendered their resignations and they were in line for the succession to the presidency because the government shutdown made it impossible to do the things that you need to do in order to prepare the way procedurally for a new Congress and a new president. Will they do that? In all likelihood, they'll be saying, well, even in among the Biden partisans, they'll be saying it's not right or good or fair or wise for the country to do things that way. Who knows what happens if there's a question about, we don't know who's in control. There might not even be a House of Representatives. I guess the national security types would be like, well, what happens in response if there's an attack? Like, we leave ourselves vulnerable to international enemies. Yeah, we do. Of course, one of the big problems with just going ahead and inaugurating a Republican Congress and Donald Trump as president is you leave yourself vulnerable to national security issues and international enemies. Yes, but here by design, because it is the president-elect's intention to surrender to Russia on all points of foreign policy, and he was elected to do so. So it's okay, as opposed to having it happen because chaos is not okay, even though the new incoming president loves chaos as much as he loves surrendering to the Russians. So I don't know how to game it out, except to say, well, there are some very serious functions of government for which you definitely, for stability's sake, want to be able to rely on, actual precedent and practice. But all of it is up in the air. Why? Because of the thing we were in the middle of telling you. In scrapping Johnson's plan for a CR, Republicans cast doubt on his ability to maintain the Speaker's gavel in next year's Congress. Johnson must run for the position again when the new House is sworn in on January 3rd, maybe. And enough GOP lawmakers to deny him the position have already declared that they won't support him, according to two members who also spoke on condition of anonymity to describe private conversations. I am hearing from an increasing number of people, this sounds like Trump, but it's because it's Andy Harris talking. I'm hearing from an increasing number of people, both inside and outside the Freedom Caucus, the only important subgroup of congressional membership, that they're not viewing how this was handled favorably. That's how he said it, that they're not viewing how this was handled favorably. This is Andy Harris, chair of the pugnacious and ultra-conservative Freedom Caucus, separately told the Washington Post on Tuesday. He did not care to be anonymous in that one. Johnson has declared repeatedly over his nearly 14-month speakership that the House will not pursue, quote, Christmas tree bills. I told you about Christmas tree bills the other day. So named for all the legislative ornaments that hang on a year-end funding measure. Though, I remind you, the fact that it has a name should tell you about the relative frequency with which Congress does, in fact, adopt such bills. But in trying to funnel additional disaster aid to farmers, Johnson cracked the bill open to broader negotiations with Democrats, upsetting Republicans who were licking their chops at reshaping broad swaths of federal policy under unified conservative control in 2025. Musk, who sometimes, I don't know where the who came from, Musk, sometimes boosting false claims on X, the social media site he now owns, trashed the bill in an hours-long tirade, calling it terrible, criminal, outrageous, horrible, unconscionable, crazy, and ultimately an insane crime. And he really knows how to boost the rhetoric like Trump does. There's nothing at all that warrants that kind of rhetoric about it, but what the hell? Why don't you say it? Then people will believe you and be on your side. That catalyzed opposition from Republicans who were wary of the bill. Soon lawmakers piled on to crying what had become a major funding package on the eve of Musk and his partner, Vivek Ramaswamy, they're not romantic partners, pledged to chainsaw federal spending through the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, the non-governmental panel that Trump has named them to run. That's one way of doing it. Well, we told you we were going to take a chainsaw to the federal budget. We're canceling the whole thing. Okay. Hours into Musk's campaign, Trump ordered Republicans to, all caps here, get smart and tough, or force a shutdown by walking away from a deal that the GOP's top congressional official negotiated. The president-elect called for a CR that preserves certain items that Johnson supports, such as aid for farmers and disaster relief spending, but strips out Democratic priorities and pairs it with a suspension of the debt limit, which caps the amount of the federal government can borrow to pay its bills. The current suspension is set to expire early in Trump's term next year under a bipartisan 2023 deal. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance huddled with Johnson and House Appropriations Chair Tom Cole late Wednesday evening to try to break the impasse. We had a productive conversation, Vance told reporters as he left, but I think we'll be able to solve some problems here and we will keep working on it. Oh my God, he doesn't belong in the Trump administration at all. Democrats responded by declaring there would be no renegotiation. Let's see. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries secured language in the Johnson bill to fully fund reconstruction of Baltimore's collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge, transfer RFK Stadium, not RFK Jr. Stadium, the RFK Senior Stadium from federal control to Washington, D.C. control, which would pave the way for a new home for the NFL's Washington Commanders. Who cares? And lower some prescription drug costs by going after health plan administrators. And I guess, well, I'll tell you who cares. People who want to work at the stadium. Okay, fair enough. Schumer told Democrats, we have a deal with Republicans and we're sticking to it. Ha-ha. According to a person familiar with the Senate leader's message, speaking on condition of anonymity, who cares about that? Anyway, House Republicans now unilaterally decided to break a bipartisan agreement that they made. House Republicans have been ordered to shut down the government and hurt everyday Americans all across this country. Jeffries told reporters Wednesday night, House Republicans will now own any harm that is visited upon the American people that results from a government shutdown or worse. An agreement is an agreement. That's what a normal person says about these things. But mind you, where will most totally disengaged voters, or non-voters for that matter, come down in deciding as between one statement, which is, listen, House Republicans will now own any harm that is visited upon the American people that results from a government shutdown or worse. An agreement is an agreement. They have to abide by this. Okay, interesting. Well, I also found out that this bill is terrible, criminal, outrageous, horrible, unconscionable, crazy, and ultimately an insane crime. Well, that sounds a little bit more compelling. I think I'll go with that interpretation. It would be an insane crime to pass this bill versus, well, if there's any harm visited on the American people, whoever they may be, you'll own it. No, I'll own it versus committing an insane crime. An insane crime. Yeah. They have it over us rhetorically. We'll have to give that to them. You don't have to hand it to them, of course. They're just going to come and take it to you. So I don't violate you don't, under any circumstances, have to hand it to them rule. Okay, so, wow. Well, that's what's new-ish on the shutdown front. Funny, it didn't look newish when we first read about it. But okay, let's see what else we can muster up for discussion in the last half hour of the show. I mean, most of these things that I have in the top of pocket are all about the shutdown, but I think we've given as much time as we have to that one. We can move on when we return after this, whatever this is. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, speaking of baseless speculation, I have here in my hand a list of one article that Scott sent to me that I guess falls under the baseless speculation umbrella and hits a lot of the high notes for the sort of thing that weirdos like to pass around on the internet. It's not originally the original weirdo I'm talking about, of course, is Rand Paul. The secondary weirdo would be Scott handing this to me over the internet, but it's Rand Paul's fault how weird this thing is because he's the weirdo in charge of this bit. Axios picks up on it, and as you know, they report everything in this weird format where everything gets the same bullet points, why it matters, between the lines, etc. So it forces them to treat this thing. It's actually a terrible format now that I think about it, because it forces them to treat every weird utterance as equally worthy of analysis, and that's not really the case. So Axios, a little bit like, I don't know what, like the Facebook of the mainstream media, I guess, functions to normalize everything. And it's really terrible. Rand Paul floats Elon Musk for House Speaker. And yeah, this is, you immediately recognize it as, I mean, maybe, why not? It can happen, but that's part of the eye roll of it. Yes, the House Speaker doesn't have to be a member of the House, but they always have been. But yeah, you could make Donald Trump Speaker of the House. They thought about floating that when, he lost the 2020 election. Could it happen? I mean, they could do it. Could he force them to do it? I guess, maybe. And I'll primary anybody who doesn't vote for me. That would be an unprecedented power grab. That really ties it all together. I'll primary anybody, or I'll pay for the primary against any Republican that votes for this CR. That's, unprecedented. But that's one thing. But what about I'll pay for the primary of any Republican who doesn't knuckle under to me and vote for me as Speaker of the House? And wow, that would really be something. Can you do it? There's nothing in the rule. It doesn't say anywhere that the dog can't play basketball, and doesn't say anywhere you can't do this. Leave it to Rand Paul. But again, as far as unprecedented nonsense goes, Elon Musk has been elected to nothing. You really want him to be Speaker of the House? All right, well, what about Rand Paul? Rand Paul has been elected to something, but it is called the Senate. And traditionally, and again, all tradition is out the window here. Traditionally, there's one president at a time. Traditionally, a Speaker of the House would say an unelected, maybe kind of sort of advisor to a president-elect doesn't tell the Speaker of the House how to handle a continuing resolution. But in his case, of course, he does. So why not everything else? And a senator doesn't tell the House of Representatives who to elect as its speaker either. So that ordinarily engenders some resentment and pretty much means it won't happen. Other things probably mean it won't happen, but they could just rely on this one. Senator Rand Paul is floating Elon Musk to be Speaker of the House after the powerful billionaire tech businessman, which he isn't, helped torpedo a bipartisan agreement on a short-term spending bill. And again, hammering it into normalization shape. Why it matters? Well, why would that matter? One wonders. Well, I don't know, but the orders are we have to put this in everything. Why it matters? He's the first GOP lawmaker to explicitly suggest Musk should be Speaker, and his comments come as Speaker Mike Johnson's bid to keep his job is under serious threat. That's a real reach for why it matters. There's another bullet point here under why it matters. Musk has already emerged as one of the most powerful voices in politics, sort of, because you're letting him do it, and has become one of President-elect's closest confidants. And you just keep reporting that as a normal thing. So why it matters that you should not do that? Because it's not normal, and you should not pretend it is so that people don't read the newspaper and go, I thought it was odd, but seems like it all checks out. What he's saying? Nothing would disrupt the swamp more than electing Elon Musk, Paul posted on X, which Elon Musk owns, and is sure to see it, on Thursday morning. Think about it. Nothing's impossible, not to mention the joy at seeing the collective establishment, a.k.a. Uniparty, lose their ever-loving minds. Okay, I mean, that's a great way to run the government, and I understand why your neighbor did what he did. Between the lines, again, stupid Axios thing they have to have. Here's what's between the lines. Ready for just the absurdity of this normalization format, I think becomes clear in the first two words, without even looking at what comes next, of between the lines. What's between the lines here? The answer of what's between the lines, as far as Axios is concerned, is the Constitution. No, those are the lines, actually. Sorry, not only are they the lines, it's the paper you're writing the lines on. But between the lines, I'm sure they wanted to say something about the Constitution, but it just highlights the absurdity of it all to start this way. Between the lines, the Constitution does not specify that the Speaker of the House, does not specify the Speaker of the House has to be a member of the chamber, though they always have been. Some bullet points. Non-representative names have been floated over the years during speaker elections, well, usually by people who have an actual say in it, by members of the House. Usually wait for that. Paul has long been an advocate for slashing government spending. Here comes the normalization. Though he is in the wrong chamber to have much say over who will win the Speaker's gavel in January's floor vote, Trump, meanwhile, told Fox News Digital, if that's different from Fox News, on Thursday morning that Johnson will, quote, easily remain Speaker if he quote, acts decisively and tough, unquote, and eliminates, quote, all of the traps, this is Trump, all of the traps being set by Democrats in the spending package. Because as we know, the Speaker of the House has no say over what's in the spending package. All right. I don't know. I thought it was a good opportunity to mention that Axios is guilty of normalizing this whole thing, and we should, we should stop reading their stuff, but at the very least, we should point it out every time when we do read their stuff, how dumb their stuff can be. All right. Let's see. I mentioned in the morning's post, but we haven't discussed it at any point today. Today, December 19th, is the 4-year anniversary, that is to say, so this happened on December 19th, 2020, of Donald Trump's call to arms, I guess, summoning people to Washington for the January 6th riot with the "Be There, Will Be Wild" tweet. Just wanted to note that for the record. and that he did that, and that really, honestly, that relates to why he now wants to arrest Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney held him to account, among others, held him to account for January 6th by saying, look, this was very clearly the plan. As early as December 19th, he's summoning people to Washington mob style, telling them it'll be wild. How could it not lead to, wildness? Or I guess it could not lead to wildness by Donald Trump being incompetent at everything. But in this case, he succeeded in creating a wild type situation, which is, riot and insurrection. And it's his fault. It's pretty damn clear. So anybody who says that now is subject to Republicans imagining that they can make a criminal referral about that person. But, normal rules would prohibit it, but normal rules will go out the window if Donald Trump gets this set of nominees, although quite honestly, if you defeated these nominees, he would nominate some other slate that would also knuckle under and do this, even if they're less well known as crazy people. All right? Okay. So let's see. Some other things that I wanted to share with you. Let's see. This is still all about background about the CR and its collapsing. Other things to get to. I guess this feels like I've forgotten the context with which I put this in the queue, and it's always dangerous when it's a Marcy Wheeler article, because context is everything with empty wheel stuff. But I don't know. She was tweeting it out, posting it on Blue Sky the other day, and I've forgotten for what reason, what prompted her to do it, other than she had just written it. But this actually goes back to December 10th, and I guess is useful in the context of the Hunter Biden pardon, reactions to the pardon, the January 6th pardons that are virtually certain to come under Donald Trump later, provided we can actually swear him in as president, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't remember. Now I just don't remember what the specific spark was for this piece, which is entitled Zero Accountability. The 5+ times DOJ got fabricated evidence against Hunter Biden. We were reading, I think maybe it was sparked by, maybe this recirculation of the piece was sparked by the Smirnov allocution in court, right? The admission of guilt in the charges that he made up all of the accusations against the Biden family stemming from their supposed involvement in Ukraine. Anyway, it says here, the other day, former FBI agent Asha Rangappa attributed the 11-year scope of Hunter Biden's pardon, 11-year scope, to the possibility that, for the first time, the FBI and Justice Department could literally fabricate evidence or collaborate with a foreign government to find, quote-unquote, find evidence of a, quote-unquote, crime with zero accountability. And here embedded is Rangappa's Blue Sky post about it. People criticizing the Hunter Biden pardon need to recognize, for the first time, the FBI and the Justice Department could literally fabricate evidence or collaborate with a foreign government to find evidence of crime. I just said that. That's why the pardon goes back to 2014. Think McFly, I guess Back to the Future, sort of. I'm not certain what, or Think McFly. Oh, I guess that's it. Oh, I see. Not, that's what you should be thinking about, but the line from the movie, Think McFly. Okay. Anyway, not a particularly relevant reference if you ask me, but okay. What's she talking about? Rangappa is not wrong that the ability to fabricate evidence to invent new crimes with which to charge Hunter likely helps explain the scope of the pardon. I see. And here again, this is the 11-year scope, meaning he's pardoned for everything that he may or may not have done from 2014 forward, I guess. Is that what that's supposed to mean? Why does it have to be so broad? Well, Well, for the same reason it had to happen at all. You cannot leave the prosecution of Hunter Biden in the hands of people like Donald Trump, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and people like Matt Gaetz, even though he didn't get the Attorney General's job. Who knows whether he'll have an ongoing role in this administration anyway. I mean, he doesn't have to be in government to have a role. Elon Musk isn't in government. He has a role. So, and it's because if you leave it in their hands, they won't follow the normal rules that would say, well, you can only charge a person if you have actual evidence, or that evidence has to be real, or that you can't just fabricate it and then tell the court, no, it's real. And the court's saying, well, we'll just assume it's real and go forward. What do we know? Why do we think this is a problem? Rangappa is not wrong that the ability to fabricate evidence and invent new crimes with which to charge Hunter likely helps explain the scope of the pardon, but her suggestion that a second Trump term would be the first time that the FBI was in a position to do this is itself a symptom of the zero accountability that allowed Trump to win a second term. You know, Marcy's always got to point that stuff out, right? Asha Rangappa, you said a great thing. You've made a great point here. You can't leave the prosecution in the hands of the Trump administration because they'll fabricate evidence. Now, how do you know that they'll fabricate evidence? It's not just baseless speculation, right? Right. And therefore, it's not wise to say for the first time this will happen because Marcy watched it happen before, which means this can't be the first time that it happens. And in fact, part of the problem of their being able to fabricate evidence with zero accountability is how do we know that there'll be zero accountability? Well, some of the people who claim to be the foremost proponents of holding them accountable are forgetting that they have already fabricated evidence and therefore are not holding them responsible for it. Therefore, boom, zero accountability, even before we start. What does she mean? The FBI and the DOJ already allowed various types of people, from spies to grifters to informants to an assistant U.S. attorney, to fabricate evidence against Hunter Biden and his father at least 5 times, with another 4 instances of potentially false evidence that she'll list later on. It appears that such fabricated evidence played a role in the collapse of Hunter's plea deal, David Weiss's request for a special counsel authority, and the evidence that convicted Hunter in his Delaware trial. And whatever its influence on Hunter's ultimate conviction, how Republicans work to insert fabricated and otherwise suspect information into Hunter's case is a lesson for how it'll continue to happen. The following list includes 5 examples with numbered headings that present compelling evidence of fabricated information, either used by Congress or the DOJ to go after Hunter and his father, along with 4 suspect incidents. The first 5 are presented in an order of seriousness with regards to the effect on Hunter's due process. The Post will review each. I'll do a follow-up that explains the lessons that we can take from this. I guess may already have been done because this is from December 10th. 1. After sharing a debunked Fox News meme, Alexander Smirnov makes false claims of bribery. We, of course, have read that he just pled guilty to that. That's what we're doing here. 2. Derek Hines narratively plants a crack pipe in Wilmington. Derek Hines, one of the right-wing lunatic influencers who insisted that, it's all very serious, and if you don't think so, well, then Hunter Biden smoked crack. So that's serious, right? The one we know about, or you hear a lot about in the news, he lied on the gun purchase form, right? And lying on the form is bad, so we should definitely be prosecuting him for it, but, maybe we don't have to punish him forever. But he's got to go through due process, right? Well, yes, though it's probably worth pointing out, the gun shop also lied on the gun form. They accepted it. They countersigned the thing. They said everything was A-okay. They went and sold the thing. They took the money. But I don't see anybody prosecuting the gun shop. That's odd. Number 4, Tony Bobulinski's FBI report claims that he saw a diamond pass hands. What? No, apparently not. But that makes the bribe sound that much more international super spy-ish and sinister. Paid in diamonds. Number 5, Gal Luft claims Joe Biden met directly with CEFC Chairman Yi, I don't even know who we're talking about here, in 2016. But apparently that didn't happen either. Fabricated story. Made it into evidence anyway. And then I guess the other 4 suspect incidents here. FBI enthusiastically welcomes The Economist's claims. I don't remember what they were. The Scott Brady side channel launders dirt that Rudy Giuliani obtained from Russian agents. Also highly suspect, of course. FBI makes Peter Schweizer their special Hunter Biden informant. And number 4, Judge Mary Ellen Noriega admits that a laptop, or rather admits to evidence a laptop that has never been indexed, which apparently by normal procedure and rules of evidence should have happened but did not for some strange reason. Some explanation. That first one, Alexander Smirnov, after sharing a debunked Fox News meme, Alexander Smirnov makes false claims of bribery. It's a fabrication. What was the fabrication? A longtime FBI informant, Alexander Smirnov, allegedly falsely claimed that Mykola Zlochevsky twice told him that he, Zlochevsky, was bribing Joe Biden. Guess what? Didn't happen. The resolution? According to Scott Brady's testimony, prosecutor Leslie Wolf had treated the Smirnov allegation with the same skepticism she did other tips shared via the side channel from Rudy, but after Congress leaked the Smirnov Form FD 1023 and Bill Barr publicly complained that David Weiss was supposed to have investigated it, it appears to have been a part of, if not the primary reason, why Weiss reneged on the plea deal with Hunter and obtained special counsel status and then ratcheted up the charges afterwards. The whole thing could have been avoided if they had actually, known and acknowledged ahead of time, yeah, this Smirnov thing is highly suspect. And as it turns out, totally fabricated. So the whole basis on which there even was a special counsel investigation of Hunter Biden is invalid. In fact, since every Republican accusation is a confession, they kept insisting, well, all of Jack Smith's authority to investigate Donald Trump is invalid on its face. But they lost that case. This one, I guess they won the case too, in this case, because they were able to just push forward and say, to hell with it. We're here now. We might as well go ahead with the case. Why? How? I don't know. In January 2020, right in the middle of impeachment of Donald Trump, Bill Barr set up a, quote, discreet side channel overseen via Pittsburgh U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, via which Rudy Giuliani could share the dirt on Hunter Biden that he had obtained in part from known Russian agent Andrei Derkach. As part of the process, Brady checked in on all the investigations implicated by the side channel. The SDNY, Southern District of New York, investigation into whether Rudy was acting as an unregistered agent of various Ukrainians, David Weiss's investigation into Hunter Biden, and 2 oligarchs from whom Rudy solicited dirt on Hunter, Dmitry Firtash and Igor Kolomoisky. All right, well, we're getting pretty weedy, as usually is the case here. And you know what? As I'm scrolling, I can see we'll never get through all of this stuff. I probably should just refer you to the article at this point and say, if you know your way through the weeds, congratulations. Otherwise, lots of links here. But I thought it was important mostly just to bring up, in light of, once again, the possibility of Kash Patel and Pam Bondi as the 1-2 punch here, who can just throw out all the DOJ guidelines with respect to whether and when and why to investigate anyone in particular. There has to be, solid probable cause based on real evidence. Not anymore. Not anymore. Is it just speculation that these two might collaborate to allow that? Not really, given that the last Trump administration bent the rules so hard that they were able to fabricate evidence against Hunter Biden and go all the way to the point where he would be convicted and require a sweeping pardon to get him out from underneath. The consequences, the convictions coming from a special counsel's investigation that never should have been allowed to go forward, that was predicated on fabricated evidence. The guy who fabricated it just pled guilty to it. And they've been crying the whole time, oh, all of this Russia investigation against Trump has been on the premise of fabricated evidence from the Steele dossier, except they investigated it and found, well, no. Actually, there was plenty of information outside of the Steele dossier. We never needed it in order to predicate this investigation. So you're actually wrong about that. Whereas there's just no way to get to a David Weiss special counsel investigation of Hunter Biden minus the Smirnov testimony, which he just pled guilty to and is about to be convicted and, I guess, sentenced on as well, except who knows whether that survives the flood of pardons coming after January 20th. If there is a January 20th. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, I probably shouldn't have headed down that rabbit hole. Not this late in the show anyway. Let me also update you on the fact that you may have picked up on this on your own without waiting for this, but we're still, unfortunately, wrapped up in question marks over the ownership of Alex Jones's Infowars. Remember that was supposedly settled. It was stripped from his possession and put up for auction, and then the Onion bought it, and then somebody intervened in court and said the auction in which the Onion was able to purchase it was improperly held, but it really wasn't. But they got the judge to agree that, well, I don't know. I'm worried about the way this looks now. There was something a little bit weirder about how it looks. If you were wondering, like, for instance, how is it that the Onion had the cash to buy Infowars versus somebody, why didn't a billionaire come riding to the rescue, an evil billionaire come riding to the rescue of Infowars? They tried. And they actually put up more cash in their bid. As I understand it, what ended up happening was the Onion wanted to make a funnier bid, and though they didn't have as much cash, they did get the beneficiaries, or this, who were supposed to be the beneficiaries of this sale, the Sandy Hook families that Jones tormented for years, were supposed to be the beneficiaries of this sale. And so the Onion ownership group bolstered its bid by engineering an agreement by the Sandy Hook beneficiary families to forego some certain amount of money in exchange for having it sold to the Onion. If the Onion buys it, we only will require X amount of money be paid for it. But if the other guys buy it, then they got to, pony up all the cash, essentially. And I can see where that might cause a problem for the court. But, if the beneficiaries want it that way, there's not that much you can do to say that's invalid. But the judge also thought, well, there should have been more bidders, etc. Now, a new wrinkle. Elon Musk, that stupid jerk, has his hands in everything. Elon Musk's X is stepping into the legal fight over Alex Jones's Infowars. We found out about that the other day. We spoke about it at some point in the past. Experts say it's unprecedented, and it is. And who's telling us why? Hadass Gold at CNN. This all the way back from November 29th, though. But just a reminder of what's going on. And apparently it's working, and we still have no resolution here. Elon Musk, the basis of his intervention was to claim to be the first social media platform, the first time that they've ever stepped in a legal dispute over account ownership. Can you sell the Alex Jones Infowars Twitter account as part of the assets of Infowars, or does that asset, as Twitter is claiming, belong to Twitter? Jones's Free Speech Systems, the parent company of Infowars, was recently auctioned off to help pay for some of the nearly $1.5 billion Jones owes to the families of Sandy Hook massacre victims after he was found guilty of defamation. The satirical news site The Onion was declared the winner of the auction with the backing of some of the families in a 7-figure bid that Jones and his allies are challenging in court. The sale includes Infowars' website, studio equipment, all regular, normal stuff, online dietary supplement store, and social media accounts, which are followed by millions of users. In past legal disputes over account ownership, can you sell them? Social media companies have left it to the courts and parties involved to work it out. But in this case, for some strange reason, X is stepping in, objecting to Jones and Infowars' X accounts being a part of the sale. Elon Musk, hands down, is a hero, Jones said on a recent episode of his Infowars show, praising the billionaire X owner for intervening in his case. That stands out to experts in social media law. This is the first time I've seen a social media platform arguing to a court that no one can transfer interest and ownership during a dispute who owns an account because they will just switch it off, says Toby Butterfield, who teaches social media law at Columbia University's law school. Oh, I'm late. Got to get the hell out of here at this point. In a filing this week, although this was the end of November that they're talking about, with the Texas, of course, bankruptcy court, attorneys for X said the company does not object to the overall sale of Infowars' parent company, but objects to any proposed sale or other purported transfer of any account used by Jones or FSS, the free speech systems, that is maintained on the X platform. And that's because X says the terms of service make it clear that accounts cannot be sold and are ultimately owned by X. Well, that's not unusual for social media platforms' terms of service, maybe. Technology companies usually enforce those terms quietly and do not step into public court battles, said Eric Goldman, an associate dean and professor of tech law at Santa Clara University School of Law. So, I guess still a little bit of a gray area, which is maybe why they've remained quiet about it. But that would be an interesting thing to enforce across the board. Not that they will. But I think we've heard examples of influencers more or less transferring ownership, in fact, of entire accounts to purchasers. But what about doing it more sub rosa, right? Like the fact that some influencers will just take cash payments to just say whatever their sponsors want. Is that a sale of the account? Are they just leasing the account? Can X make claims to a portion of that revenue? Well, I guess if they're anti-Musk or anti-Trump, you might see that happen.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That's definitely something to ponder, a prediction of corruption to come. But how about predictions of stories to come on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy when Justice Putnam takes the mic in just a few seconds? President Musk also on the top of his agenda, and good on him for continuing with the meme. What's up with President Musk? Find out more next.